So a few days ago, I released a project called Things Could Be Worse. It's a 4-track EP that was initially supposed to be created in a treehouse with no real structure or framework in mind, kind of just like a moment captured in time. But going into it, I had no clue it would become what it evolved to be. This is the story of Things Could Be Worse. So as a kid, I was always really fascinated by tree houses. I was a big fan of Codename Kids Next Door, and I really just wanted a treehouse in my backyard. I'd always been an outdoor kid, and always wanted to be surrounded in nature. So with that in mind, fast forward years down the road, being an artist and a full-grown adult, I decided to browse Airbnb and book a treehouse. I thought it might be cool to try creating something in somewhat of an unfamiliar environment and just changing up the pace of what I'm used to. So eventually I come across a treehouse in a town a few hours away from where I'm at now, and I end up booking it that night. And then the day finally comes, pack all my equipment, and I hit the road that morning. I drive to this tiny town with nothing but trees. The treehouse that I was staying at was owned by a family that owned a massive plot of land, and on that land there was a bunch of other treehouses, cabins, you name it. And all of those were being rented out on Airbnb as well, so keep that in mind. So once I arrive, I find where I'm supposed to park, and I start walking up this hill. And the hill eventually leads to a giant flight of stairs, and another flight of stairs, and another flight of stairs. And once you get all the way to the top, the treehouse door is right there. But in order to get past this hill and get to those stairs, you have to pass another treehouse, which is right at the bottom of the hill, right next to where I parked. So I start walking up the hill, I'm passing this other treehouse, and this older couple is right outside on the deck. They see me and they're like, hey, they're asking me if I'm staying up at the treehouse up the road, and I tell them, yeah. I guess they were gonna book that same treehouse, and they were curious to what it looked like in person. So we made a bit of small talk, and eventually they asked if they can come check it out. They also asked me if I needed any help taking my stuff up. I only had 2 backpacks and my guitar case, so I politely declined, but I told them they could come up and check it out after I dropped my stuff off. The husband threw me a beer, and they're telling me a little bit about themselves, where they're from, what their lives are like, and they're super nice, and the conversation was super casual. I ended up leading the way up the treehouse and gave them a bit of a tour after, and they went back down to their spot and we parted ways. Fast forward a few hours later, and it's mid to late afternoon, and I'm starting to get pretty hungry. So I map out a spot nearby and I start heading that way. Keep in mind this town that I'm staying at is pretty secluded. I think the population's probably like less than 1,000. There's not a lot of businesses in that area, so there's maybe 2-3 restaurants within like a 10 to 15 mile radius. So I end up pulling up to this pizza shop that's right on the edge of town. Little did I know, this is a really poppin' place apparently, and I ran into that couple once again. I end up eating with them for a bit and just talking, and the dude's kind of drunk, slurring a little bit, and he's telling me all these stories and he's being really repetitive, but I didn't really mind. I was just glad to meet some friendly people out there. Eventually I head back to the treehouse and I start working on some songs, and shortly after I got back there, the couple down the road got back too. I was heading down to my car to grab some things, and as I'm walking back up, they invite me to hang out for a bit, and they've got this little bonfire set up, and we're just hanging out, drinking, shooting the shit for a bit. And at this point it's getting pretty late, so I end up heading up to my treehouse and I end up going to bed. Well, the next morning I wake up and it's pouring rain. I'd planned on going on a hike, grabbing a coffee, and then recording some stuff bright and early, but my plans definitely got derailed because of the weather, and eventually I just ended up sitting there playing guitar and writing in a really weird manic state. And I don't know if it was just because I was out in the open, didn't really know anybody out there, was super isolated, and I just got really in my head, but all of these thoughts keep coming left and right, and I just had this really bad feeling in my gut like something bad was gonna happen. I couldn't really pinpoint where it was coming from, but not being able to get anything done and having my mind wander was definitely the downfall of this entire trip. So I'm trying to record as much as I can and get as many photos and videos as I can while I'm here, but it's pouring rain. So I've got this little makeshift setup on my tripod with my jacket covering my camera, and I'm just running around all over the place frantically, trying to get as much done as possible. I head up to the bedroom, which is like the top floor of the treehouse, to get my backpack and bring it down, and I hear a voice call my name. And I look out from the balcony, and it's the husband. He's walking up the steps to my treehouse, and he was asking me, oh, like, how's recording going? And he kind of tell that I was defeated by the weather. So he tells me him and his wife are going to grab food and drinks at that place that we were the day before, and they wanted to know if I wanted to come and join them. I politely declined, but he kept insisting and kept nudging, like, come on, like, you deserve a break. And in retrospect, I know he was trying to lift my spirit. Something in my head kind of told me otherwise. So I decline again, and he tells me they'll be back in a few hours, and he heads back down to his spot. I don't know what the hell was going on in my head at the time, but a combination of everything, along with me just being an anxious person overall, somehow convinced myself that he was plotting on something. Anytime I get into a thought process like that, it just becomes question after question after question until I end up scaring myself. So eventually I convinced myself that he was gonna kill me. With that in my mind, as soon as I saw their car drive off in the distance, I grabbed my bags, packed all my stuff, got a few more takes, took a couple more photos and videos, and I left. I hurried down the stairs to my car, threw my things in the back, and I drove home in the rain. In retrospect, it sounds ridiculous, but in the midst of everything, it felt real and it felt justified. I'd convinced myself that I was in harm's way, even though I more than likely wasn't, and had a fight or flight response to that. This wasn't just a one-off thing either. I've dealt with anxiety my whole life, so things like this have happened, but just not as severely under these kind of circumstances. But my anxiety's always held me back in some way, shape, or form, whether it be socially, or me just diving too deep into thought. I've always kind of had this tendency of being pessimistic in some way or another, even in the simplest scenarios. I'm that guy that crosses the street if somebody's walking the same way towards me, and if I don't cross the street because I feel too awkward to do that, I end up holding my breath for some odd reason. Like I'm gonna breathe the wrong way or something and something's gonna come of it. And none of it really makes sense, but my brain likes to tell itself that it does, and it keeps me from doing a lot of things that I really want to do. And that's ultimately why I decided to make this project in a treehouse and step out of my comfort zone. Even though the end result led to me leaving, it still opened my mind to what I could do with this project, and it ultimately shaped the entire narrative to surround my anxiety-fueled trip there and back home. Even though I felt somewhat defeated by the end result, the day after I got home brought my spirit back up to kind of where it needed to be. With everything that had unfolded and what I already created in mind, it kind of came full circle for me, and I decided this is what the project needed to be about. And not just for the sake of telling a story, but for me to really explain how my head works under these strange circumstances. And that same morning, I went to an empty park, kind of near where my house is, brought my guitar, and I had these high hopes that the same energy from when I was at the treehouse would come back and help me finish writing there. So I sat on a park bench for maybe 20-30 minutes, give or take, just playing around with different chord progressions, and then eventually I came up with something that I liked. So I'm trying to hum and try to figure out these lyrics, and nothing's really sticking, and all of these mosquitoes are biting me up. So I start humming, I got this melody down pat, and I start singing about all the mosquitoes that are biting me. It started as a joke, and it fit beautifully, so I just kept writing as it came to me. I went home not long after that, and I ended up recording Mosquito along with some demos of what I had worked on at the treehouse. And the rest of that day was just spent shaping the project into what it eventually became. My hope with being this open and honest about what went into the project is that it inspires others to do the same and not really feel ashamed for the things that you feel like are out of your control. Anxiety sucks. And I know a lot of people out there have their own struggles with it, but nobody's alone in that, and everybody just deals with things differently. Your coping mechanisms don't change the fact that these problems are real to you, and they have a real effect on your mind. So, with all that said, I hope there was something for you to take away from this, and I hope you enjoyed the project. This video is super different from my usual run, so sorry if it feels a little off compared to my other stuff, but let me know what you think in the comments, and maybe I'll make more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.